Welcome. In this presentation, I want to discuss management and discipline. Ask yourself some questions. What is a well-managed class? And how do you know a well-managed class when you see it? What are those signs? What are those things that you can look for? As an observer, it's easy to tell a well-managed class from a poorly managed class, but the more important question is, how did it get that way? I mentioned before that this is one of those areas that can actually make or break a new teacher. But first, what I want you to do is consider this. What do you think of when you hear the word discipline? Some people think punishment, some would say consequence, some would say being yelled at, or maybe even a spanking, or in my case, it would be a whooping, not a spanking, but a whooping. But in most of the cases, the word discipline carries a negative connotation, and we tend to focus on that negative aspect of discipline or being disciplined. The word discipline comes from the word disciple, which also means to teach or to provide instruction. And when you think of someone who is well disciplined, you don't think negatively. You think of someone who's thoughtful or respectful, maybe cooperative or considerate of others. So as you develop your thoughts and ideas on classroom management, try to first look at the positive definition of discipline before moving on to the negative one. And this means that you're being proactive and developing positive habits, behaviors, and expectations so that the need to negatively discipline a student becomes unnecessary. In a well-managed class, the teacher holds the students responsible for education and learning as well. There should be a natural consequence for behaviors or actions that are unacceptable, but the teacher must remain consistent in allowing the students to experience those consequences. Students need boundaries, they need rules, and they need guidelines to follow. They're not going to come to you and say, I need boundaries or else I'm going to be out of control and difficult to handle. But students respect a teacher that remains consistent and fair on enforcing the rules and expectations. So in the physical education setting, you must have something for the students to do immediately and try not to allow them to have any downtime unless you're giving instructions. This is one of the first steps in addressing management and discipline issues and minimizing the concerns that you may likely have in a classroom. Now let me take a step back for a moment. Before you get into effective transitions, all-inclusive lessons, developmentally appropriate activities, or even participation, you must establish your protocols and your procedures and spend time reviewing those. This should be done immediately at the beginning of the school year and consistently reviewed, sometimes weekly, sometimes monthly. Students need to know all of your classroom rules, and they need to know the expectations for physical education instruction as well. This should not be any different. Inform the students as to the appropriate method for preparing for PE. Whether you have students form a single file line to go from point A to point B, 2 rows, maybe a line of boys, a line of girls, or arrange the students by desk, whatever it is, practice walking from point A to point B over and over and over again. Let the students know what to expect, what you expect from them, and what will happen if they fail to follow the directions. There were times when in my class all we did was walk around a field or take equipment out or put equipment away or move from one location to another location over and over and over again until the students realized what I expected and that we weren't going to progress to anything else until they followed those directions. My students knew that there was no participation without cooperation, and this was a sign I had in my gym and in my classroom that I would refer to over and over and over again. In the textbook, they state that if a class is unmanageable, it's also unteachable, and I believe this to be extremely true. You must also get your instructions in as quickly and efficiently as possible. Develop a method to get the students' attention so everyone is listening to you when you have instructions to give. And this can be a hand clap, some rhythmic clap that you start and the students finish. It can be a verbal countdown, or you can hold up 5 fingers in the air and begin to count down on your fingers from 5 to 1, or even a phrase like the 1, 2, 3, all eyes on me. Regardless, develop a method and use it consistently so students become familiar with it and they know that you mean business and that they need to pay attention and to give you their undivided attention. If a student is using equipment, always make sure that they put it down to listen to you. Kids are easily distracted already, and if you allow them to continue holding equipment, they're just going to keep playing with it. So make sure you address how to use the equipment correctly and what to do when you're giving instructions. Being able to stop and start your class quickly, efficiently, and consistently will be extremely beneficial to a well-managed class. A whistle can be a physical educator's best friend if used correctly. Oftentimes, students are scattered in an area, they can't hear you, you're trying to get their attention. Also, you won't be able, and you should not be able, to always yell loudly all the time. You need to save your voice. Speaking loudly and yelling are two different things. But you want to be able to quickly get the student's attention, provide some general instructions, and then allow them to continue participating without having to wait a long time for students to pay attention, without having to have other students off task, giving lengthy instructions. A whistle can be extremely helpful in doing this. Also, know what groups and formations are effective for the lesson, are effective for providing instructions and for gaining control of a class. Whether you're participating in an individual activity, partner, small group, or even large group activities, get to know the students and their abilities to minimize any behavioral issues. Kids will always want to stick with their friends because they're afraid of the unfamiliar. Just telling a student to find a group without their friend is not going to work. As a teacher, you must develop the effective grouping. You need to be responsible for any appropriate group type activities, arranging the students in a formation or a way that minimizes any type of classroom disruption is your responsibility as a teacher. Placing students in groups without their friends is going to be a technique that reduces your discipline problem. So once you recognize the students and familiarize yourself with their names, this is a good habit to begin. Another thing that's helpful is knowing the names of your students and encouraging everyone else in the class to know the names of all their classmates. Whether you use a seating chart, you have students write their names on their PE clothes if they have them, take pictures of your students, post them on the class wall, or just consistently ask the students their names as you call on them. You can not only improve your instruction, but address students quickly and appropriately with feedback, with praise, and even with correction if you need to. Another thing to consider when addressing management and discipline is developing clear consequences for off-task behavior. For example, a fight should not carry the same consequence as a student who's simply daydreaming while you're giving instructions in class. But you want the students to know what they can expect if they refuse to participate, if they use the equipment inappropriately, if they're consistently late, if they're continually wanting to go to the bathroom, or anything that can become a problem. As a teacher, you must recognize the pattern of off-task behavior and allow students to experience the natural consequence. Sometimes the school will have school-wide rules that they'll ask the teachers to impose as well. Things like the use of cell phones, chewing gum, whatever it is, you need to be consistent in administering some form of discipline, whether it be campus beautification or like a paper pickup, assigning detention, whatever it is. Let the students know what they can expect based on their behavior. Is sitting a student out of an activity self-defeating, or is this an acceptable punishment? When should you send a student to the office? Is this a sign of a weak teacher who can't manage their class? What do you do when a student refuses to dress for PE? Also, can you suspend a student from your class? These are questions that many teachers have and don't know how to address them. Unfortunately, it only takes one student and a poor experience to cause a good teacher to quit the profession. So addressing all of the possible situations and trying to have answers to all of these questions and developing appropriate consequences is going to be helpful, as well as to you and other students. So be sure that you hold students accountable and set up clear, specific guidelines for instruction and expectation for participation, as well as consequences. There are some wonderful teachers who have developed some excellent classroom management techniques that you can learn from. Keep in mind that within education, lesson plans, teaching strategies, management methods, all of these things are not copywritten. If you see a teacher or hear of a teacher employing a good strategy that has demonstrated some success, use it. You should never refuse or be hesitant on employing a strategy from another teacher thinking that you're taking or stealing from that teacher. Whatever is going to work, whatever is going to help you in class, it's probably been done already. So be sure you utilize some of the resources from other teachers and apply them to your situation. Sometimes the class dynamics or the demographics may be a little bit different, but some management approaches can be used and modified to be successful in a variety of settings. I'm going to take a break here, and then I'll continue with part 2 of this presentation in the next video.